Good morning, everyone, and a very, very happy new year to you all. Welcome to today's brush party. So today we're painting the super cute turtle time. But before we get started, I just want to talk you through all the equipment you're going to need before we start. So you need to make sure you've got a fresh pot of water. You might also want some napkins now, or paper towels of some kind, just in case of any spillages for cleaning your brushes, mostly for spillages. They're very useful to just have dotted about. So make sure you have got some paper towels or napkins of some description. So I have also got my palette. Now, my palette is just a paper plate. You guys could use a plate from your kitchen if that's easier. The paint cleans off really easily, so don't worry too much, just as long as you've got something with edges, because that's what saves all those spillages. Now, I've also got my canvas here in the portrait position. So that means I've got my long edges at the sides and my short edges at the top and bottom. You can actually do this painting any way around you would like. All the instructions work the same way, whether you have it landscape or portrait, so there's no worries either way. You might have a spot in your house that would suit a landscape painting better, so you can always just turn your canvas round and have it long ways instead. It is entirely up to you. You can also have as many turtles as you would like. So if you've got maybe 4 people in your family, you could do 4 all different size and coloured turtles. So there are loads and loads of options for you so that you can make this completely your own. And it's the same with colours as well. You can do your turtle and your background and your ocean in any colours you would like. Now, I've also got my paint brushes. So we always use the same brushes for all of our brush parties. The first one is our big brush. This is the big number 8 brush, and it's just a big flat brush with an angled top, but that's not essential. You just need to make sure you've got a nice big brush. That's all that's important, because we just use it for the background. So yours might be a big round brush, maybe like this. That is absolutely fine as long as it's nice and big and we can cover that background nice and quickly. So I've also got my 3/8 brush. Now this is just like my big brush. It's flat, it's got that angled top, but it's a lot smaller. And this is really good for doing all the detail in this painting. So all of that seaweed and seagrass you've got at the bottom of your canvas, this brush is perfect. But you don't have to use that brush. As long as you've got one of these, everything in this painting can be done with this brush. This is the number 6 brush. It's just small, round and pointy, and you get it in most packs of paintbrushes. So you should have one of these, hopefully. And this is perfect for doing all of that detail. You can do the seaweed, you can do the seagrass, and this is really great. So make sure you've got one of those and you'll be absolutely fine. Now, just before we start, I also want to remind you guys that we have got our live chat feature. Now, that is there for you if you have any questions, any issues, if you just want to say hi, if you want me to go back over anything, then just let me know in that chat and I will do everything I can to help you out. You can also pause and rewind as much as you need to. So if you want to take a little bit more time, if maybe your canvas isn't drying quite quickly enough, any reason that you might want to stop and just go back over anything, you can pause and rewind as much as you like. So you don't have to keep up with me. Don't feel like you have to rush. You've got plenty of time to get this painting done. And it's 11 o'clock, which means we are officially starting. So very warm welcome. And as I said, a very happy new year to you all. Hopefully a much better year than 2020 was. We can always hope. So my name is September, and I will be talking you through all the steps of this painting. I will be with you the whole way. So as I said, any questions, any issues, just let me know and I will help you out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the colours that I used to make this version. But as I've said, you guys can use any colours you would like. So I'm going to start with white. We need quite a bit of white because we want to make our background nice and light. We want to make those lovely fuzzy like bubbles of colour in the background. And also we use this for drawing in our turtle. So definitely make sure you've got plenty of white on your palette. My white is running out, so it makes a very rude noise, so I'm very sorry. Let me just, there we go, plenty of white on there. So as well as white, you're also going to need some blue. Now mine is a cyan blue, but you guys can use any shade of blue you would like to. It doesn't matter which blue it is. as long as you've got plenty of blue on there, because we need quite a lot for our ocean. And we also need it for making our green. Now, if you've got a pre-mixed green, you can use that. That's absolutely fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up my own shades of green, and I will talk you through how to do that. Just make sure you've got plenty of blue, and then you're also going to need some yellow, because we need lots of yellow for making that green. So let me just pop some yellow on my palette as well. And then the final colour we need is black. We just use black for a little bit of our seaweed, and that's kind of all we use the black for. So you don't need too much black at all. Just make sure you've got a little blob of it on there, and you will be absolutely fine. So just 4 colours for today's painting. Plenty of white and a nice big blob of yellow as well, so we can mix lots of shades of green. Some blue and then a little bit of black just for doing that detail in the background. And those are all the colours you need. So just a quick reminder, pot of fresh water, some napkins in case of any little accidents, and also for cleaning those brushes, it's really handy. The 3 brushes, so as long as you've got 1 big brush and then some little brushes for doing your details, you will be absolutely fine. Those are all you need. And then I've got my canvas in that portrait position, but as I said, you can have your painting whichever way around you would like. Now, please, please remember, acrylic paint stains. It does not come out of clothing, and it does not come off soft furnishings. So make sure you're wearing something that you don't mind getting paint on. And please be really careful of your carpets and couches and curtains and things, because the paint does not come off. It does, however, come off skin really easily, and it comes out of hair really easily. So don't worry about that. Just as long as you're careful of your clothing, you will be absolutely fine. And I think it's time to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our background. Now, for the background, we use our big brush, and the first thing we're going to do is pop it into our water. Acrylic paint works best if it's always just a little bit watery, a little bit more fluid, just helps everything spread out on our canvas a bit more. So I'm popping my brush in my pot of water, and then I just scrape my brush on the side of my pot to make sure my brush isn't too soggy, because I don't want any drips running down my canvas. And what we're going to do is we're going to start down at the bottom, and we're going to mix ourselves up a little bit of a greeny blue colour. So what I do is I take some yellow. When you mix your acrylics, you always start with your lightest colour, which is yellow. So we have a bit of yellow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a touch of blue. Now we add the blue really gradually, because otherwise our colour can go a little bit too dark too quickly. And so we want to do this quite gradually. So just a little bit of blue at a time. And I want a bit more of a turquoisey colour. So I'm going to keep adding my blue until my green is a little bit more of a turquoise, a bit more of a bluey green. So I'm going to add a tiny little touch more. And as I said, you guys can do these any colours you would like. So you could have like a purpley ocean. To make purple, you can just add a bit of red and blue together. Lots and lots of options for you. So I'm just adding blue into my yellow until I get a lovely turquoisey colour. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a touch of white, because as I said, we want quite a nice light background, so that as we come up the canvas, it gradually gets lighter and lighter, so it looks like we're moving up off the ocean floor all the way up to the surface of the water. So I'm now going to take a nice dollop of white and just mix that in with my greeny colour. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to pick up some water. Now, as I said, we want to make sure our paint stays nice and fluid, because it's much easier to paint with. So what I do is I take my brush, pop it into my water, and then transfer a whole brush load of water. So I'm not scraping it on the edge of my pot now. I'm taking my whole brush load of water and I'm transferring that into my paint, and then pressing it into my green mixture so that all the water comes out of my brush and mixes in with my green colour. There we go. So it's really nice and fluid. It's not too sticky, and it's going to spread out really nicely. And then what we want to do is we want to start right down at the bottom of our canvas, so all the way down here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start with a bit of a curvy line, because what this does is it starts to make our painting look a little bit like it's got some kind of waves moving through it. So it looks like the water's moving. And what we want to do with that greeny blue colour we've got, every now and then you want to pick up a bit of white or maybe a bit of blue. So we want our colour to gradually change. So what I've done is I've picked up a bit of white and I'm just going to fill in down to the bottom with my curvy line. Now please remember to paint around the edges of your canvas as you're going, because we want a lovely, nice, neat finish at the end. So there we are, just working my brush in that slightly curvy line. Don't worry about the very bottom of your canvas because we will paint that later on. You don't need to worry about that at the moment. But those edges, you definitely want to make sure you are filling those in as you go. There we are. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a bit more water on my brush, pick up a bit of my green again, my greeny colour. So I've just got a bit of my green colour on my brush, and this time I'm going to pick up a bit more white. I want a slightly lighter colour this time. And I'm going to come over the top of my curve, and then I'm just going to carry on with that curvy line and just build up the layers of my water. And you can brush down into your green colour as well. We want all our colours kind of mixing and blending together. So I just keep working these colours up my canvas. And then I'm brushing down into the part I've already painted as well, because it helps my colours blend together and it creates this lovely streaky background. Sorry, there is a really loud helicopter right outside my house. Quite low by the sounds of things, so I'm very sorry about the noise that's about to happen. I think it's a Chinook. It's a Chinook. All the birds have flown off, so sorry about all the loud noise. And then don't forget to paint those edges as well. So you just want to make sure you're painting your edges as you're painting the fronts of your canvases as well. There we are. So keeping up with those curvy lines. So as you can see, it's a bit streaky, which is perfect because the water's never really like one solid colour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up a bit of my green colour again. And this time, I'm going to pick up a little bit of blue as well. I want a slightly more bluey colour. So I've got blue and a bit of green. And I'm going to add a bit of white just for luck. So what we do is as we build up our painting, we just keep mixing those colours together. And you can pick up any combination of colour on your brush that you would like to. Just work with your blue, your greeny colour and your white. And you just keep adding slightly different tones and shades into that water. And then you can carry on just working on that slightly curvy line to create that slightly wavy look in the water. So this time I'm not picking up any green, I'm picking up my blue and some white just to make it a little bit different. But because I haven't cleaned my brush, there's still going to be a bit of green on there, which is lovely. So we just get an even more different colour going on. And then again, I'm brushing down into the bits I've already painted so that I just get this lovely graduation of colours. And as you can see, it's all a bit streaky, all kinds of different shades going on, which is perfect. This time I'm going to have plenty of white. So I'm going to start with my white and then a little bit of that greeny colour. Oh, I just left a massive blob of colour down on the bottom of my painting, which I will fix in a second. So this one was a bit of green and white. I just need to pick that up. And then just carrying on, making it slightly curvy as I brush from side to side. And then just kind of letting my brush travel across the whole canvas so that all my colours blend together. And then just remember to do those edges as well. I always forget my edges, so I'm going to keep reminding you just because that helps me remember as well. So we'll just make sure our edges done too. There we are. So I'm going to go back to my greeny colour now, I think. A bit of green, a little bit of blue and some white just to keep it all nice and bright. And I'm going to have to stand up because I'm a little bit too short to reach my whole canvas. So it makes me a little bit taller if I stand up. And then carrying on with that curvy line. And what you can do, if you want to, if you're feeling particularly brave with your painting today, is you can change the way your line curves if you want to. So let me just carry on with this bit, and then I'll show you how to change the curve of your line. So you can make it a little bit more dramatic if you want to. Let me just do this edge. There we go. So if you want to change the way your wave curves, what you do, pick up another colour. So this time I'm going to go white and blue. I'm not going to get any green this time, but again, because I've still got some green on my brush, I'm going to get that slightly turquoisey colour. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to curve the other way. So I've created this different line, and then as I fill this in, my lines will come together and create a different shape. So you get kind of a different line of waviness going on, and you just get a slightly different pattern to your water. So just picking up a bit more white to go with my blue. And then just making sure to brush down into the colours I've already painted. So going back over where I've already painted, so just make sure my colours are blending together and my new lines kind of merge together a little bit. There we are, that time I got a bit of green on my brush. So now I've just got a slightly different shape to my water. And then I'm just going to make sure that edge is painted as well, because I've missed quite a lot of my edge. So I'm just going to pick up some blue and green and white, just super pale colours on my brush, and just make sure that whole edge is filled in. It doesn't matter if it's a bit different to what's going on the front of your canvas. Just make sure if you get a little flick of paint around the front, if you just pick it up and just drag it into the painting, it just makes everything come together a little bit better. There we are. And we really want to start making it really quite pale up at the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mix myself up a super pale blue, just so that I've got a really nice light colour to be working with. Can you see that? So I've done a super pale blue as well, just to make sure that everything's much lighter as we go up. So picking up some white and some green, and then I've got that pale blue on my brush as well. So we've got lots of different colours still going on, but we're just making it a little bit lighter. There we are. And just make sure you always add a bit of water. So if you're finding that your paint isn't travelling very far, it's all just getting a bit stuck and not going all the way across your canvas, just mix a bit more water into your paint. Oh, nearly sent that flying. There we go. Yeah, just mix a bit more water into your paint and you'll find that it just flows a lot better and it spreads out further on your canvas. And more of my pale blue, I think, with a little bit of green. There we are. A little bit of my pale blue, tiny bit of green and some white. And then continuing with that new shape of waves. But you can make your waves a different colour again if you want to. Different colour, different shape, I mean, sorry. You can make them a different shape again, so you can change the line again in exactly the same way we did before. You just change how it kind of spreads out across the canvas. So you can paint in a new line. So for example, you could do a line that curves the opposite way. And then again, just paint down to where you've already been so that your lines are going to blend together. I've just flicked paint all over myself, which is great. So as you can see, I'm just joining up all the different layers of the painting so that my colours continue to blend together, but now I've got that new kind of shape to my waves again. I just need to go back into just adding a bit more water into my pale blue so I can just come all the way up to this corner. There we are. And then this final corner up here at the top. I just made it a little bit more greeny. There we are. And I've definitely missed out a lot of this edge. See, I told you, if I stop mentioning it to you, I stop doing it. Very forgetful with my edges. There we are. So that's that whole edge done. And then I've definitely missed out a bit over here as well. So we'll just make sure that edge is painted too. And then it's just flicked over onto the front a little bit. So I'll just blend those colours in. And then finally, we need to paint the very top of our canvas. So using whatever the last colour was you finished with, you just want to make sure you go all the way along that top edge as well. And make sure the very top of your canvas is also painted. There we are. And that is all of your background completed. So what I'll do is I'll give you guys a little moment, make sure you've all got your backgrounds done, because the next thing we need to do is we need to map in our turtle. Now, we're going to use white paint, and because our background won't be completely dry, it might go a bit of a funny colour, but that's fine. All we're doing is mapping it in so that when we paint it green, it stands out really boldly against the rest of our background. Now, for this next step, you're going to want to use one of your small brushes just so that we can get some nice accurate shapes in there before we start to add all of the seaweed and the seagrass and all the lovely decorations. So we are going to be using our small pointy brush. But as I said, I'll give you guys a little moment, make sure you've all got that sorted, and have a quick sip of my tea. There we go. If I move this forwards a little bit, it might help just for when we start to map in our turtle. Now, as I said before, you guys can have as many or as few turtles as you would like. There are no rules at all. I'm going to stick with the one big one, but you guys can do as many as you would like. So because we are going to be using a fresh brush, we need to pop it in the water. So pop that in the water and then scrape off any excess water off the brush. Now, we need to use white for this. And I don't know about you guys, but my white has got a lot of blue and green in it. It doesn't matter. As I said before, this is literally just a mapping session. So we're just like sketching in where our turtle is going to go. So you can use that dirty white. That is absolutely fine. It's actually quite a good thing because it just uses up that extra paint that you've got that's a little bit dirty. So you can use the slightly bluey green white paint that you've got if yours is as dirty as mine is. So we can use that. So I've just kind of given it a bit of a stir so all the colours kind of blend in together. And then I've just got a super pale kind of turquoisey colour. And what I'm doing is I'm just adding a bit of water into it to make it nice and smooth. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the shell and then we'll gradually build up our turtle from there. And the best thing to do is to start quite small because you can always make your turtle bigger, but you cannot make it smaller. So we start with the shell, just adding a little bit more water. Sorry, it takes a bit more time because it's such a small brush and I want to add plenty of water. So just mixing my water into that white paint. There we go. And then just scraping off some of the excess. We don't need too much paint on our brush. Now, what we want to do is we want to find a spot on our canvas that's about 1/3 of the way down in the middle. So what we do, we work out where the middle of our canvas is. Really roughly, this is not an exact science. It doesn't need to be bang splat in the middle, so don't worry. But we want to go about in the middle and about a third of the way down, which is about here. And I've just left a little white dot, and this is going to be about the top of his shell. So the lower down, the better. You don't want it to be too high. Mine actually probably is a bit too high, but that's fine. You guys can go a little bit lower if you want to. It's entirely up to you. And if you're doing a couple of different turtles, what you can do, watch me sketch out the turtle, and then you guys can add them wherever you would like to once you kind of know how the shape works. So what we do is we start to create the shape of a leaf. So this is about the middle of my turtle's back. So it's about here on my turtle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve across and down. Now I want to leave a gap because I want to make sure I've got plenty of room for my turtle's back legs. So what I've done is I've curved towards the right hand side of my canvas and stopped about a quarter of the way in. And then what you can do is you can then curve down and come back up. So we're creating that slightly, it's more like an eye shape, isn't it? That's what we're starting with, almost like a teardrop shape on its side. Now, as you can see, this shape does not look like this shape. And as I said, we start smaller than we want it to be. Got loads of space for his head, which is perfect. So once you've got that kind of teardroppy leaf shape, what we can do is we can start to add a little bit more detail. So we want this little indent here where his neck is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up that line. I'm just going to come across to about a third of the way in from the edge of my canvas. So as you can see, it's curving down slightly. And I'm coming just a little bit across the top to about a third of the way in. And then what I do is I just add a little triangle, just a tiny little triangle like this. Doesn't matter how big it is because we can change it later. It's not essential. It just helps us to know where our turtle's head is going to go. And then what we do is we come down and join back up with the bottom of our turtle. Like so. So we started with that leaf shape, and then what we've done is we've come over to the left across about, so we're about a third of the way in, and then added a little triangle there. And then we just curve back down to join the rest of the body of our turtle. And you can make your turtle as big and fat as you would like him to be. And once you've got that shape, the best thing to do is actually to fill it in. It sounds really silly, but it's a lot easier to see your shapes once they're filled in. Now, you can use your big brush for this just because it fills that space a lot more quickly. If you use a tiny brush, it takes forever. So I'm just going to swap to my big brush quickly and just fill in that whole shape. Now, because my background paint is still a little bit wet, my shape's going to go a bit of a funny blue-green colour, but that is fine because, as I say, we're going to paint over this with green when we fill our turtle in. So it does not matter at all what colour your turtle body goes at this stage, because we won't see it all later. And then you just fill it in, and it really does help to see the shape you've got. There we are. So it looks a bit of a funny shape at the moment, but that is okay, because when we paint him in green, we can change the shape a little bit, or what you can do is you can look at it now. So I'm just going around those edges to neaten them up a bit. You can look at it now and you might think, oh, it's the perfect shape. Or you might think, I want him to have a bit of a rounder belly, or maybe a little bit more of a curvy back. So what you can do is you can just start to play around a little bit, make him a little bit fatter in his belly, or maybe make him a bit sharper over the back. I might make mine a little bit taller up his back. So just add in a slightly steeper curve. Like so. And I think I quite like that shape. So I think I'm going to keep it. The next thing we need legs and a head. They're quite important for our turtle. So I'm going to go back to using my small brush because it's just so much easier to add in our shapes once we've got one with our smaller brush. You can just be a little bit neater and more accurate with it. So I'm going to pop my big brush to one side and go back to my little brush. So we'll start with the legs, and we start with the front legs. And what we do with that small pointy brush is where we added that little triangle right at the front where his head's going to go, we start his leg just underneath that. So what I've done is I've added a little dot so that you guys can see. So we've got that neck section there, and then I've just added a little dot next to it. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create a bit of a triangle shape, curvy triangle that comes down. So I've come away slightly from the shell. This is the shell. And I've come out slightly and curved down for his front leg. And what we'll do is we're just going to add lines for the legs, and then we'll build them up later. But this is a really good way to kind of map them in. And then if we don't like them, we can paint over them. But for now, it just helps to see where those legs are going to go. So his first leg, which is this one here. And then we need to leave a little bit of a gap. And then we can add his second front leg, which is going to come down a bit lower. So the same shape, you curve out and down. But this time we want it to come a bit lower because it's closer to us. So this is his back leg, this top one. And this one here is going to be his little front leg. And now we've kind of drawn the lines for them. We can start to fill them in a little bit. So we'll start with the bottom leg because that's kind of the main one. So we come down, and then what you want to do is you want to kind of curve back in. So leave yourself a bit of a gap, and you curve back in and down. So it's a bit of a funny shaped triangle. And then again, if you fill it in, you get to see a bit better what shape you've got. So we've got a bit of a curvy triangle. And then it can just come down. Doesn't need to be a point, it can just be a little flat shape, like so. And again, start small because you can always make it bigger, and we can always make it bigger when we fill it in green later as well. So like I said, we're just mapping it in for now. And once you've got that front leg, you can kind of see where your back leg's going to go as well. And it's quite nice if you leave a tiny gap between them, but don't worry if you can't do that. So just fill in that top one. Maybe leave a tiny little gap between them if you can, but it's not too important. But then you just want that bottom section of the leg to kind of stand out a little bit. I say leg, I think they're flippers. But I'm just going to call them leg. There we go. So it's like a skinnier version of the front one. And don't worry if you don't manage to leave a gap, it's not too important. I just find it helps to be able to see where the two legs are. Separates them a little bit. And then for the back legs, they're kind of like squares. So this time we're going to start with the front one because it's a bit easier. So the best thing to do is find the end of the shell, which is about here. And then you want to come down about a quarter of the way down the shell. So about here. But again, it's not exact, and your painting will be a little bit different to mine. So if you just take a little bit of a step back, you can have a look and see you want the front legs at the front and the back legs near the back. And apart from that, it's kind of up to you exactly where those legs go. Just make sure you've got a bit of a gap in the middle for his belly. And what we do is we start off by painting in like a diamond shape, like so. And then again, we can build it up a bit. So it's a bit of a diamond that just sticks out the bottom of his body. And then what we can do is we can make it a bit more curvy. We want quite soft diamond shape. And then again, if you fill that in, it's just a lot easier for you to see the shape you've got. Bit of a diamond, like so. And then for the back leg, just like with the front leg, we want it similar, but a bit smaller. So what I do is I leave a bit of a gap again, and then I just copy part of that shape, like so. So I just added that same curvy diamond shape just one side of it. And then again, you can just fill that shape in and leave a little gap between the legs if you want to. But we want it a bit shorter, just like with that back leg at the front. So the back leg's always a little bit shorter than the front leg. I actually think that looks a bit longer. So I might need to make this foot. It's not a foot, it's a flipper. This back flipper, this one here, the big one that's at the front, could maybe go a little bit lower, but it's fine. For now, this is perfect. As I said, this is just sketching it in so we know where our turtle is going to go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add his head. Now, this bit is a little bit tricky because we don't want to end up with a massive head on our turtle. So what we do is we start with the neck, and then we start with a tiny head that we gradually make bigger. So for the neck, what we do is we want it coming out of this section here. So I'm going to start it coming out of the bottom of that triangle. And we just start with a bit of a neck that's going to curve up, and that's going to make the top of his head. So I'm literally just adding a tiny little curve out the top section of the triangle, and it's going to be the back of his head. So just a little curve. And then you can have your next line coming out of the bottom section of the neck, like so. So we're making a bit of a tube coming out of his triangle shape. And what you can then do is fill that in as well. So just fill in the main part of that shape, because again, it just helps us to see exactly what we're working with. And then what you can do is you can just create a little ball on the end of your tube. Sounds a bit of a weird way to describe it. Start with a little ball, because otherwise he's going to have a massive head, and we don't want a massive head on our turtle. So you've got this tube shape coming out of his body, and then what we've done, it looks a bit like an ice cream cone. We've got a blob of ice cream coming out of the neck. And then what you can do is you can add that little snout shape, which is just a little curve that comes out of the ball and joins the bottom of the neck. Now, this turtle's head is tiny. It definitely looks too small for the rest of his body, but it means we've got our rough shape. So we have our tube with a ball on the top, and then you just create this little curve coming out of the side of it for his little snout. And then what we can do is we can just build it up a little bit more. And I still think it needs to be just a little bit bigger to kind of match with the rest of his body. So what I do is I make the circle shape at the top a bit bigger, and then I make his snout shape a bit bigger afterwards. And then I just join it up to the bottom of his neck. There we are. I think that's a lot better. And then you can paint over that triangle shape as well if you need to. So his head and his body join up. And actually, you could probably do a slightly bigger head still, but for now, I'm just going to work with this. And then, as I said, once we add the green, we can make all of him a bit bigger. But for now, we just want to work with this shape so that we've got the main parts of our turtle painted in. And then we can just have loads of fun filling in the rest of the painting without worrying about our sizes and our shapes. So, if you want me to go back over any of that, I know that's quite complicated, but now it's done, we can just do the fun parts now. So the tricky bit of measuring, which we started off with that leaf shape. We had a leaf, and then we just extended our leaf a little bit. And then for those legs, we had just curvy lines coming out to the left, dropping out the front of his body for those front legs. And then we added those curvy diamonds at the back for his back legs. And then we just built up his head. Now, my turtle's head, I still think could be maybe a little bit bigger, but I'm going to leave it for now, because when we paint green over the top, we'll have a much better idea of what we're working with. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop those little brushes to one side, because the next thing we're going to do is we are going to start to add that black seaweed right in the background. Now for this, we use black, But we also want to use, if you've got one, your little 3/8 brush. Now, this brush is really, really good for doing those little grassy lines because it creates really neat lines. But you don't have to use one of these. Your small pointy brush that we've just been using works just as well. Now, the best thing to do when painting lines is make sure your paint is really nice and watery, or really fluid. Not too watery, but nice and fluid. We don't want it too sticky because it makes painting lines really, really tricky. So what we're going to do, pop that 3/8 brush into your pot of water and then add some water into a little bit of black. So what I do is I just section a little bit off to the side, and then I'm just going to add a couple of brush loads of water in there just to keep it all moving nicely. Now, the key to your little angled brush is to make sure you don't have too much paint on it. If it's really full of paint, your bristles get really spread out and you end up with quite scruffy lines. So you want to make sure you always scrape off the extra paint. And then what you can do is you can dip that little line of bristles back into some of your paint. So you just got a little bit on the end, but it's not too filled up with paint. Now, if you're using your small pointy brush to do this, which is absolutely fine, what you do is you mix your water in, mix the water into your paint. And then what you'll find, once you've mixed your paint and your water together, is you end up with quite a blobby brush. It's quite messy, but we want nice crisp lines from this as well. So what you do is you hold your brush in your paint and twist your brush in your fingers. And as you twist, you pull out of the paint. So you come away from the paint. And what it does is it takes all the excess paint off, just like with our small angled brush, but it also brings your brush back to a lovely crisp point. So you can get nice, neat lines with this as well. So if you're using the small pointy brush, you twist your brush to get the extra off and get it pointy. And if you're using your small angled brush, you just scrape the brush on the edge of your palette and you get that nice crisp line. Now, for this section, we are going to be painting up our canvas. So very important, most important thing to remember, short bristles at the top if you're using your small angled brush. You always lead with those short bristles. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by adding just a bit of a wiggly line along the bottom, and that is our ocean floor. So what we're going to do is we're going to come along here. You can leave a bit of a gap, a couple of centimetres up from the bottom, and you can just create a really wiggly line all the way along the bottom of your ocean. And it can go a bit higher at the edges. You can have lots of mounds and little hill bits, and it doesn't need to be particularly neat. And what you want to do is you just want to fill all of that in with black paint. And don't forget your edges. Don't worry about the bottom. We're still not painting the bottom. We will paint that later when we add that yellowy gold colour at the front. But for now, we just want black paint in here, filling in that whole bottom section with black. Oh, I've definitely forgotten this edge, haven't I? There we are. Paint that edge in as well. There we go. And then once you've got that whole base painted, this is when we start to add the grasses. And what we want is we want them longer at the edges and slightly shorter in the middle. And if they overlap your turtle, that is absolutely fine. It does not matter if you overlap your turtle slightly, as long as you've got longer bits at the edges and shorter bits in the middle. And what we do, we scrape off the excess paint, short bristles at the top, and we just start to drag our brush up the canvas. And then along the bottom, you can just add slightly smaller flicks, but we want the occasional big long line so that we can add the leafy bits to our seaweed. But what we're doing is we're just filling that whole bottom section of the canvas with these flicky lines coming out of the black section to create this seaweed jungle at the bottom of our painting. So we just work our way along. And they can all be in different directions, and some of them can be fatter than others, and some of them can be thinner than others. There are no real rules. Just make sure every now and then you add a nice long spindly bit that we can add those little leaves to and create lovely bits of seaweed, which our turtle will need to eat because they like to eat seaweed and seagrass. There we are. And then I just work my way along the bottom, dragging my brush, almost flicking my brush. So I'm doing this gesture. I'm flicking the brush up from the bottom, up from that black section, and just adding these bits of grass. And then just every now and then adding a slightly longer bit of seaweed. And as you can see, all my bits of grass kind of go in different directions. Some of them are quite fat, some of them are a little bit thinner. There are no real rules. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Just make sure you got plenty of grassy bits along the bottom. And we want to go all the way along to the other side. So what I do is I add in some grasses, and then every now and then I'd pop in that slightly longer seaweedy bit, that slightly taller bit that's going to come up and have petally bits on. So having to stand up again so I can reach all the way to the other side of my canvas, and then I'm going to have another long seaweedy bit that's going to come up quite a bit taller over there. Now that bit's overlapped with my turtle, but it does not matter at all. As I said, these bits will be covered up once we fill in our whole turtle, so do not worry at all. Just make sure you work your way all the way along, adding your grasses. So I keep going back and just picking up a bit more paint. Make sure your brush has plenty of water and you're mixing that water into your paint. Because as I said, the more fluid your paint is when you're painting lines, the better they come out. They just come out a little bit more full and they're a bit easier to paint. And then what I'm doing is I'm just dabbing a bit of extra paint along the bottom in the gaps between some of my grasses, just little flicky dabs with the brush to just give a bit more of a solid finish. There we go. So it's now starting to look a little bit jungly. We've got our lovely jungle seaweed ocean floor. There we are. Slightly taller one on that side as well. And as you can see, some of these are overlapping my turtle, but it's fine because they won't be seen later on. There we go. And once you have added your sea grasses and your nice tall bits of seaweed, what you want to do, if you've been using your small angled brush, is you want to swap to your small pointy brush. And what we're going to do with the small pointy brush, it makes perfect little leaf shapes. So if you've been using your small pointy brush to do all of this, carry on using that brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up our black paint. So just as we've been doing, just making sure there's a bit of water mixed in there. And what we're going to do, twist that brush so that the extra paint comes off because we don't want it too thick. And your brush will create a perfect leaf shape all on its own. All you have to do, let me bring this a bit closer to show you. All you have to do is take the brush and press it into the canvas. So I'm literally holding the brush and pressing the point into the canvas, and then just pressing down into the picture so that the bristles spread out a bit and make a lovely leaf shape. So I just press into the canvas with the brush and it creates my leaf shape for me. And what we do is we just work our way down the blades of seaweed. So down the longer, curvier lines. In fact, you can do these anywhere you would like to. There are no rules about which bits of grass you should put it on and which bits you shouldn't. And then you just press your brush and drag it slightly towards the line. And the bigger press you do, the bigger your leaf shape will appear. So you just work your way down those tall bits of line, adding in your leaf shape. So you just press the brush and then drag slightly down towards the line. And they can be the same on both sides. You don't have to make them into a pattern. You can make them really, really random. You could have lots on one side and none on the other side. You can just play around, making it as random or as neat as you would like. So that's 2 bits of seaweed there. I think I'm going to add some to this piece here that's going to be covered up a little bit by my turtle. So I just pick up my black paint and then just press my brush into the canvas, drag down slightly, all the way down to create the lovely leaf shapes. And then I think I might have some on this little one here as well. So maybe slightly smaller leaf shapes. So I just don't quite press as hard and I create the slightly smaller shape. Oh, I nearly popped my brush in my cup of tea then, which would not have been very nice. So just doing slightly smaller leaves on this one by just pressing a little bit less, holding that brush slightly closer to the blade of grass. Nearly stuck my brush in my cup of tea again. I need to move my cup of tea, otherwise I'm going to end up with paint in it. And then let me come across here and I'll do this tall grass here. Oh, got that paint on my finger. So I'm going to do one bit at the top, the very top. And then again, just work my way down that blade of grass or seaweed. Like so. And you can do this to as many or as few of your tall bits of grass as you would like to. So it is entirely up to you how many little leafy bits you add. And then I think I'm going to pop some on this piece that comes up here. So again, a lot of this will end up being covered by my turtle. So where it overlaps the white, I'm not going to worry too much about adding leaves on there because they'll end up being a bit covered up, but we do want some further down. There we are. And then maybe a couple along here as well. There we go. And I think that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to do that many kind of seaweedy bits, like so. And as I said, where these black lines cross over the white, they're going to be covered over when we paint it green. So don't worry at all about those bits. Don't worry if you think you've ruined your turtle. You most definitely have not. And then you can just give those big brushes, or little brushes, sorry, a bit of a rinse off, because the next thing we want to do is we want to start adding these lovely kind of like hazy bubbly effects. So to add these, we do it with our fingers. So what we want is you need to make sure you've mixed yourself up. In fact, you don't even need to mix the colour, because we're going to use blue and white. But if you want to use a colour that isn't blue or white, if you want to mix yourself up another colour as well, make sure you mix it with a brush first, because mixing with your finger takes forever. It's a bit of a pickle. So what you do when you're ready, take a finger, pick up, for example, a tiny little bit of white, just a tiny little dot of white. And then what you do, pick a spot where you would like one of these to go, just dab the paint on, then using a clean finger, just start to circle your finger over that dot of paint. And then I think I'll do another one over here. Don't do any in the black area until it's dry. So we can add some later on if you want to, but don't add any to your wet paint down here, because otherwise you will end up with big black blobs. So I'm now going to add a couple of blue ones. So blue paint on my finger, just pure blue. I want them to be a little bit dark. Let me do one right up here in the corner. So I've blobbed my blue paint on, and then using this white paint is dry, so it's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. Just circle my finger around that blob of paint until I get a lovely big circle shape, like so. And then I think I'm going to do one over here near to my white blob. It's quite nice if they're quite near, close together. Like so. And then I think I might do a couple more white ones. So I'm going to pop one down here near my turtle. Now it's okay if you overlap your turtle a little bit, because again, it's going to be covered over when we paint him green. So I'm just going to pop a little blob of white on there, and then using a clean dry finger, just circle it in. I think I want another one up here near my big blue circle. There we go. And maybe another little one in here, away from my wet black paint. There we go. And I think maybe one more blue one, because it's looking a bit empty over here. So just a little blue one up there. So to get the smaller circle shapes, you just use a little bit less paint. You get slightly smaller. There we go. Our little bubbles floating around. So I will let you guys just do that. And then what we need to do is we need to start painting our turtle green. He definitely needs to get green quite soon. And what you can do as well, my black section is still quite wet. So if you want your canvas to dry off a little bit more quickly, what you can do is you can either use a hairdryer if you've got one, or if you just pick up your painting and just give it a bit of a waft. I won't do mine on screen because I don't want you guys to get a bit motion. I get a bit motion sick when I watch things move too much on the screen. So just waft my painting a little bit and just dry it off a bit more so that we can start to add a few more layers. So don't forget, if your painting isn't drying quickly enough, you can always pause the video and then come back to it when it's a little bit drier, or you can do the wafting or use the hairdryer. Mine's still a bit wet, but that's fine. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by painting the shell. And there's a dog fight outside my window as well. There's quite a lot going on outside today. So for the shell painting, use whichever brush you would like to. I quite like to use my small angled brush for this, just so I can get some quite neat edges in there, but it's entirely up to you. And what we're going to do is pick any shade of green you would like. Now, I really like, on here, I have like a pea green for the shell. So what I will do, actually we won't, we'll start with the head and the legs, because it's quite nice if the shell overlaps them a little bit. We'll start with the head and the legs. So for that, I use a slightly yellowy green. I quite like the yellowy green for the head and legs, and then darker colours for the rest of the body. So for a slightly yellowier green, I've actually still got some green left over from my background, but I want to use that for the shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some yellow. Remember, you always start with your lightest colour. And then really gradually add blue, literally tiny little bit by tiny little bit, because I want this to be a really yellowy green colour. I don't want it to be too dark. So even that tiny little bit of blue has made that quite a bright green. And I want to just tone it down a little bit. So I'm actually going to add the tiniest little bit of black, just a really, really small amount, just to make it a bit of a dull colour, so that when I add the details, the little patches on him, they stand out a bit more brightly. Pop a bit more yellow in there, just to make it a more yellowy colour. There we go. That is perfect. So yellow with a tiny bit of blue and an even tinier bit of black. Add in some water to make it nice and smooth. And we can start to paint in our turtle. That's very exciting. So I will start with these front legs, since they're the closest ones to me. And I'm going to start with the main front leg, so the big front one. And what I'm doing is I'm just going over those lines. And if, I don't know if you can see on here, it looks like it's almost got a white outline. And that's where I just haven't quite painted over the whole of the white section. So you can leave a little bit of the white on show if you would like to. And then we just paint in our yellowy green colour over the top, like so. And then I'm going to do the back leg as well. And again, you can leave that little gap if you would like to. So you just don't quite paint them right up to the edge. And then you end up with a tiny little gap between the two legs. I just think it helps make them stand out a bit more. There we go. So just using my small angled brush. But you guys might find this easier with your small pointy brush. It's entirely down to which one you would prefer to use. And then I'm also going to fill in his head with this. So don't forget, do you remember we painted in that triangle? You can kind of add in a bit of a triangle shape around the neck. Sorry, the way the light hits that, it's really difficult to see. So I make a bit of a wonky line for his head, or where his head and his neck join, just to give his shell a bit more of an exciting shape. So you just make it a little bit wobbly. It doesn't need to be a triangle, just a little bit wobbly where it joins with his shell. And just fill that all in with this yellowy green. And if you want to make your colour stronger, all you need to do is just add another layer once it's a bit drier. So you fill it in for now, then once it's a little bit drier, you can add another layer of paint just to darken it up if you would like to. But don't forget, we are going to add the pattern of his shell a little bit onto his legs and his head. So we will be adding those as well. Now this here is a little bit wet still, but I'm going to give it a go. So just painting in the line underneath his shell. Just going over the outline. And you have a choice. So as you can see, I've got my black line that comes through some of these bits of his leg. And what you can do is you can either paint your black line back in so that the piece of grass is in front of him, or as I said before, you can just add another little layer over the top once this is dried and really push that black line into the background. So I think I'm going to push mine into the background so it will eventually disappear. So that's one bit of his leg, and then just make sure this is nice and dry so I don't end up with black legs. And then I'm going to paint in that second leg. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and leave that little gap between the two legs like I did before, just because I find it helps them stand out a bit more. But I'm a bit rubbish at trying to leave a little gap. I always end up accidentally not doing it. So I've completely failed to leave a gap between those legs. I managed it here, but not at the back, but it's fine. It's not essential, I just quite like it. One day I'll get better at it. There we are. So the back legs and the front legs are painted in. And once we've done those, then we can do the shell. So for the shell, I wanted like a super pea green. So for a super pea green, you want lots of yellow and just a little bit of blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use some of this darker green. Just add lots of yellow back into it. There we are. So it's just a little bit of blue, plenty of yellow until you get like a pea green colour. But as I said, you guys can do these any colours you would like. There are types of turtle that have just all manner of different coloured shells. You can get this really, I can't remember what it's called. It's like a snapper of some kind. And it's got a spiky shell. If you want to give your turtle a spiky shell, go ahead. There are so many different types of turtle you can get. So you can decorate your turtle however you would like to. I am always a big fan of lots of pink and lots of glitter. So you could definitely add that if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. You could even add like green glitter to some of your shell if you want to. I'm going to stick with the original, which is the kind of pea green coloured shell. So I will stick with the pea green. So what I'm going to do is I'm now just going to fill in that whole shell shape with my pea green colour. So yellow with a little bit of blue. I haven't added any black to this. I haven't added any white to this. It's just a pure green. And just try and make those edges nice and neat. I'm still using my small angled brush. Going around that neckline. Like so. Sorry, the way the light hits it, it's really difficult to for you guys to see. And then just fill the whole thing in. And then if you want to make your turtle bigger, if you look at it and you think the head needs to be bigger or the legs need to be bigger, all you need to do is just make them bigger with the green. You could always add a little bit of white into your green as well, just to make it a bit more of a solid colour if you think it needs to be a little bit bolder, or just wait until it's slightly dried and then you can add a second layer over the top to make your colours a little bit more dense. But adding white makes your colours a bit more dense as well, so that's always an option. So just mixing up a bit more of my pea green because I've run out. And then just filling it all in. So I need to be really careful because this tiny little bit of black here is still wet and I don't want to end up with a black turtle shell. So I'm just gonna try and just dab the wet colour off with my finger. There we go. There's always one bit, isn't there? Always one bit. And now we have a beautiful pea green turtle. Now, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the section of yellow and the decorations we need to do at the bottom. But what we're going to do is we're going to fill in our turtle. And then the last thing we do is we add the yellowy bit and all those decorations around the rest. It's a really lovely, relaxing way to finish off the painting. So now I've got my pea green shell. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of that pea green to add those little patches of shell shape. I don't know what they're called, but these little patches on his legs and head. I use my pea green colour for that because I really love pea. I actually just love the colour green, but I want to add some of my pea green colour in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my small pointy brush because the small pointy brush is the easiest one to use to add these details. So I'm just rinsing off my angled brush. And then I'm going to go over to my small pointy brush, and I actually need to mix myself up a bit more pea green because I've run out again. So yellow and blue, or yellow and a darker green. If you've still got some of your dark green left, you can use a little bit of that. Do need to save some for the pattern on the shell though. There we are, my pea green colour. And then what we do, add a tiny little bit of white, not because we want it to be lighter, but just because we want it to be a bit more of a bold, solid colour that will stand out on the turtle. There we go, perfect. So just add that tiny little bit of white, not to make a pale green, but just so it all stands out a bit more. And then what we do, twist that little brush to make sure you get a nice pointy tip. So I'm just twisting my brush like so. And what I'll do is I will start on his head. And what we want, so hold on, let me bring this all a bit closer again because I think it's a bit easier to see. There we go. What we do is we start over the top of the head and down the back of his neck. That's where we want to add this detail. And we just start with, you literally place the brush on your turtle's head and just kind of wiggle it around a little bit. And you can make these all different shapes. So you're literally just splodging these really rough shaped patches onto the top edge of your turtle's head and then down the back of his neck. So we just do almost like one line of these going along his head, like so. And then we can have some down towards his neck. So I'm almost like just rolling the brush to get a lovely random shape. So they're all slightly different. We don't want them to match. We want them all to be a little bit different. And then we do the same on his leg here. So this leg that's the front one, we're not going to add any to the back leg because we only want these on the outside sections of our turtle. So I'm just going to add them onto this big front leg here. And what we do is we kind of just have them down the left-hand side. So we don't want to cover the whole fin. You can do if you want to. It's entirely up to you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them just keeping them to, sorry, let me tilt that again. There we go. Just keeping them over towards the left-hand edge of his fin. So where it kind of meets up with with the fin behind. And again, just really random shapes. So I'm just taking my brush with my bit of paint, and then I literally just kind of roll some of the paint onto the leg. And these can come all the way down towards the bottom of his fin. There we go. And then for the back leg, I covered the whole thing because I quite like this colour. So I do the whole of that back leg with this pea green colour. Again, just the front leg, or just the one that's in the front, and just covering the whole thing in super random shapes. All spaced apart slightly differently. All slightly different sizes. Just super, super random. I'm about to run out of my pea green colour again, so I'm trying to make the most of the little bit I've got left. And you can have like really tiny little bits as well, if necessary. Like so. So we've got them all over that back leg, and none on the other part of the back leg. So none on the back, sounds really silly, none on the back leg that's at the back. I hope that makes sense. There we are. And then we can add the big patches onto his shell. So this is where I'm going to use my dark green that I used right at the beginning. Here we go. I've got quite a lot of it left. I'm going to use my small pointy brush still. Actually, no, I'm going to use my small angled brush because they're slightly bigger shapes. So I've got my lovely dark blue. I used dark green, sorry, I used right at the beginning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny touch of white into this. Again, not because I want a pale colour, but just because I want it to be a bit more solid and stand out a bit more powerfully over the top of the rest of the turtle. So I'm actually just going to make sure I've got enough rather than running out again. Just adding a bit more blue and a bit more yellow in there to make it a bit, just have a bit more paint so I don't run out. There we go. So I've got a lovely dark green, and that's just because it's got more blue in it. And then that tiny little bit of white just to make it a more solid colour. There we go. And what I find is the easiest thing to do is to start at the top. Can you see on here, I've got like part of a shape. I found it easiest to start with that part shape that looks like it curves over the top of his back. And then from there, you kind of build up the rest of the shapes around it. So let me show you. I'm going to start by adding and it's a bit of a hexagon, but not perfect. So again, they're all quite random shapes, unless you want to make them all really neat. But I find it easier to make mine all super random shapes. So I start with the first one, and then I build up the rest from there. So that one looks like it goes over the top of his shell. And then you can kind of add in the rest underneath and around. So you want them to tessellate, so you kind of want them to be slightly similar shapes, so they kind of all work together. We'll have another one in here. And this one's kind of going around the neck area slightly. And then we'll have another one that's a bit unfinished. Kind of goes over the edge here where the legs and the shell meet. And then we'll have another one in here. So it's entirely up to you where you have all your shell shapes. I'm sure there's a technical name for them, but I can't think what it is. And then we can have a bit of a triangle shape in there. So you can have like part sections as well, like I've got, where it kind of helps give this idea that it's a round shell that kind of carries on underneath. There we go. So while that's drying, because we need it to dry a little bit to add our shadowing, we'll add our shadowing right at the end. First, what we want to do, while that's all drying off, is we want to add this goldy yellow seaweed at the front and all the swirls and little orbs and bubbly bits. So to do this, you can either use the same colour you've used for your tortoise, or you can use a slightly more yellowy colour. So what I do, using my small angled brush again, because I want to use the same brush I used for my original grasses, what we're going to do is take yellow and then just add a tiny little bit of black, because we want it like a goldy yellow colour. I definitely added too much black. A goldy yellow colour. If you've got gold paint, you could use gold paint. That would look amazing. So quite a dirty yellow colour, so yellow with a bit of black. And then what I do is I add white, because we want this to stand out quite boldly. So I add a bit of white into there as well. So you get this kind of, it sounds really silly, but it is like a dirty yellow colour. And that is perfect. Now, the first thing we need to do, it's going to seem a little bit silly, but we need to turn our paintings upside down so we can paint the bottom edge. And finally got to the bottom edge of the painting. So what we're going to do, turn the canvas upside down. You obviously don't need to do this if you're painting on a table, but because the bottom of my canvas is all the way underneath here, I need to flip my picture over. So what I'm going to do, I'll flip this over and paint the very bottom edge of my canvas in this dirty goldy yellow colour, all the way along that edge. And don't worry if it flips over to the front a little bit, because we're also going to add some on the front. There we go. And we need to give this a little bit of a chance to dry. So while it's upside down, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a really little, like those little hills we added in the black earlier. We just want a lovely uneven yellowy ground as well. So it can have like little ridgy bits, little hilly bits, just a really kind of uneven, curvy bit of ground all the way along that bottom edge. So it's really wibbly wobbly, a little bit wonky. Like so. And then don't forget to paint those edges. So we just have that little bit of yellow on that edge. And then I'm going to flip my picture back up the right way. My bottom edge might still be a bit wet. Your bottom edge might still be a bit wet, so do be careful. There we go. So we've got that kind of yellowy green, goldy colour along the bottom. And then what we do is we just add a couple of bits of seagrass along the bottom in little bunches. So I'm going to start on the bit that looks the driest, because my black paint is still a little bit wet, but that's fine. So I'm going to start over here, and just like when we did the black grasses, exactly the same process. So make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. Short bristles at the top if you're using your angled brush. And we are going to start, I'm going to start over here. I've got a dry bit over here. And we just add in these little bunches of slightly curvy seagrass. And then we just work our way along that bottom edge. All different heights, different widths, just like the original grasses we added. Just little clusters of seagrass. Then you can have some really tiny little bits right at the bottom as well if you want to. If you want to jazz it up a little bit more. And as I say, we just work our way across the painting, adding in these little seagrasses. I always want to add more. I always feel like I need a couple more in there. Might just add a couple more of those little ones. There we are. So we've got these lovely yellowy grasses along the bottom. And then what we can do using our small pointy brush is we can go a little bit wild, adding the swirls and the circles. So for these, you definitely want your small pointy brush because you have a bit more control over curvy lines with the small pointy brush. So using that same colour we've just used, that kind of dirty yellow goldy colour, what you do is just have fun adding little circles and little swirls all over your painting. So I'm going to start here and just start with the little circle shapes. They don't need to be perfectly neat. They don't need to be evenly spaced. They don't all need to be the same size. You can just add them wherever you would like to. And then once you've added them in this goldy colour, you can then add some super pale or some super pale blue or some super pale green. Just any of the colours we've already used in our painting is a really nice way to kind of tie them all together. And then for the spirals, it's like the circle, but you just carry on and flick it round. And again, you can add these wherever you would like to. So those are my yellowy goldy ones, and I'm going to do some super pale green ones because I really love the colour green. So I'm going to add plenty of white into my green, one of my green colours. It doesn't matter which one. Plenty of white, and then just do exactly the same thing. So just have loads of fun decorating. And you can overlap any of the painting you want to. You can overlap your turtle if you want to. I'm not going to. I quite like to leave my turtle kind of standing out by himself, but you can add as much or as little of this decoration as you would like to. So just go a little bit wild. And then maybe like a super pale blue as well. Just as another final colour. So I just added blue and a bit of white. There we go. I think I've gone wild enough. There we go. Okay, so the only thing left to do is to add our little turtle face, and then if you're feeling brave enough, we can add a little bit of shadowing. Now, the shadowing, you just need to be super, super careful. So what we'll do is we'll add the little smile and the little eye for our turtle, and then I'll talk you through how to do the shadowing, but it's entirely up to you because he looks pretty cool as he is, but you might want to add some shadow. So to do his eye and his mouth, I use my small angled brush to do his mouth, just because, as you probably know by now, I quite like to use it for my lines. So you just want a tiny little bit of black paint on your small angled brush. Make sure it's not all too clogged up. You don't have too much paint on your brush. And then what you want to do is you just want to create, you bring this a bit closer, a really, really tiny little line. Sorry, my brush had a bit too much paint in it. There we go. A little line that comes across his mouth. And then to do his eye, I find it easiest to use the wrong end of my brush, stick it in the black paint so it looks like it's got a little hat on, and then you just pop his eye up near the top of his face, like so. And if you want to add those little eyelashes, you can do. So you can either use your small angled brush or your small pointy brush. Once you've added the blob for his eye, just add a couple of really tiny flicks. Like so. So he's got some little eyelashes. He looks so cute with his little face on. So to add the shadowing, what you need to do is you need a grey colour. Now you need to be really careful with this. You want to use your small pointy brush, and what you want is you want quite a dark grey. So take some black and a bit of white. Now to do this, the best way is to make your grey super, super watery. You want barely any paint. You want mostly water. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing loads and loads of water in here. And then what you do is you scrape most of the paint off your brush. So you have to be very careful because we don't want this to be too dark. So just give it a bit of a scrape off, you know, really twist as much of that paint as you can off your brush. You look how watery mine is. It's actually pouring down my palette. It needs to be really, really thin. And then what you do, the best place to do this is on those legs. Is you go round the line of the back leg. Sorry, I've got to try and not get paint all over my fingers now. You go along the line of that back leg and then just kind of drag a bit messily into the rest of the leg. And what this does is it just creates a shadow over some of that back leg. So it looks like it's in the background. And then we'll do the same thing on the front leg, so the back one. So along that line where the two legs meet, and then you just really lightly kind of drag that darker colour into the rest of the leg slightly, like so. That's a bit bold, so what I'm going to do, clean my brush off with no paint on my brush. You can just brush back into it slightly, and it just dulls the colour ever so slightly. So it makes it a bit less bold. So you just want barely any paint on your brush when you do these, because we don't want them to stand out too much. We just want a bit of shadowing. And then you can use the shadow as well. Super, super watery, barely any paint on your brush. And you can just go along underneath where your shell and the legs meet. And it just adds a bit of shadow to that part, so it looks like the shell is over the top of the legs. So you just go along the line where the shell and the leg meet and just add a tiny little bit of this grey colour, just a really little bit. And the same around the neck. You can just kind of go in where the shell and the neck meet. Just be a bit careful if your little colour patches are still wet. You don't want to spread out green everywhere, but you can just add a little bit of colour, a little bit of that grey to the bottom section of the neck, just to make it look a bit more shadowy. And then once once it's kind of dried off a bit, you'll have a bit of a better idea as to whether you want to add any more shadow or not, because the shadow can be a bit tricky to do. But you can just have a bit of a play around, and if at any point you don't like it, all you need to do is just use a wet brush with no paint on it, or a damp brush with no paint on it, and brush back into it and just soften it up a bit. And then what you can do as well is you can add a little bit of highlight onto his patches on his back by using one of your lighter greens, or use the same colour that you did the grass in, so that super pale yellowy goldy colour. Again, really watery. We don't want a lot of colour on here. And you can just add a bit of highlight to some of those bits of his shell and just make them look a little bit more three-dimensional. So I just kind of draw around the edge really roughly with my little brush, and it just makes him a little bit more three-dimensional. There we go. And that is turtle time. So don't forget to sign your paintings, and definitely pop a date on them as well, because this is your first, well, this is my first class of 2021. It feels weird just saying that. So make sure you pop a little date on there so you know what you were doing right at the beginning of the new year. So that really isn't showing up well. I have highlighted all of his little shapes, but you can't really see them too well. But you can add a bit of shadow onto those as well if you want to, in exactly the same way. So just a bit of the grey, just to make them a bit more three-dimensional. So you just pop a bit of grey in there as well. Again, it's not showing up very well. Let me do it in a bit of black. Don't use black, use your grey, but just because mine's a bit wet and a bit light still, it's not showing up too well. There we are. You can just shadow and highlight some of those bits of the, there we are. You can see them a bit better. I've done them a bit less watery. You want to do yours a bit more watery, because when they dry, it's fine, but just so that you guys can see. There we are. It's a bit better. So make sure you sign and date your picture so that you remember what you were doing this time of year. You can sign any way you would like to on the canvas. Let me move mine back a bit so you can see kind of the whole picture, and I'll tilt it up as well. So there we go. It's a bit easier to see when I tilt it up. So I am going to pop a little, I signed the top of that one. I might sign the top of this one. I quite like the little, I just sign with the letter S because September is far too long to write out. Now, I would absolutely love it if you guys would share some photos of your finished creations. You do not have to, but it would be really lovely to see how you've got on. So what you can do is you can upload photos onto our Facebook page. All you need to do is just search for Brush Party on Facebook, and then you can create a new post and upload a picture of your work, or a couple of pictures, which is always really lovely. Hold on, I'm just going to write 2021. There we go. So, sorry, I'm distracted by the new year. So what you can do is you can upload them onto Facebook. You can tag us using the @ symbol, just tag us at Brush Party, or you can upload them onto Instagram. Hold on, I'll tilt it forward again. There we go. On Instagram, we are at Brush Party UK, so you do need to change it a little bit at the UK on the end. And again, you can tag us, or you can email us directly as well. If you don't want to upload onto social media, that is fine. What you can do is you can email us, and the email address is info@brushparty.co.uk. And then we still get to see your creations, because we love to see how you've got on, how you've changed the painting, if you changed the painting at all. And just hearing from you guys is really, really lovely. So please do share a photo if you can, or if you feel like you would like to. And don't forget to check out the website for all the classes we have got coming up over the next couple of weeks. There's lots and lots available on there. Lots of lovely New Year paintings to kind of get everyone in the mood for the rest of the year. It seems really crazy to say that. The rest of the year, we're right at the beginning of it. So I'm just adding a couple more little shadowy bits to the turtle's back. And then again, you can add some highlighty bits using your yellowy colour as well. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I've had such a lovely morning with you. I really hope you've enjoyed creating your turtle, and I cannot wait to see some photos when you share them with us. I hope you have a really, really lovely rest of the weekend, a wonderfully happy and healthy year ahead, and hopefully we will see you at another event really soon. Sorry, I need to stop leaning this back so you guys can see it a bit better. There we go. I'm just going to sit here adding highlight and shadow onto my turtle all day. I really hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend. Well, what little is left of the weekend. We will see you at another event really soon. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Share some pictures of your artworks, and we will see you at another event really soon. Go along to the website brushparty.co.uk and you can find all our upcoming classes, and hopefully we will see you at another one really soon. Have a lovely day. Bye, you guys. Thank you so much.